built over decades, collapsed in days. It all started with a promise called clean diesel.
In just a few days, a brand built over decades collapsed. Stock plummeted, the CEO resigned, and over 11 million vehicles were recalled. It all started with a promise: clean cars. But what shocked the world wasn't a technical flaw. It was the fact that those cars were only clean when someone inspected them. And that's how Dieselgate began. For years before 2015, almost no one doubted that promise. Volkswagen didn't appear as a typical car manufacturer. They appeared as a symbol of German engineering, precision, discipline, and reliability. In America, where diesel cars were once considered noisy, dirty, and outdated, Volkswagen presented a completely new story. They called it clean diesel. Volkswagen's problems didn't start with advertising. They started with physics. Diesel engines, by their very nature, always involve trade-offs. To be powerful and fuel efficient, you'll produce more NOx. To reduce NOx emissions, you have to sacrifice performance, cost, or both. In Europe, emissions standards are primarily tested in laboratories, but in the US, the laws are stricter. Cars not only have to be clean on paper, but also meet standards under rigorous testing conditions. This is where Volkswagen's ambitions clash with reality. The engineers understand this limitation very well. To honestly meet US standards, Volkswagen would have to use a more complex, more expensive, and reduced performance, something they're touting as a competitive advantage. But the pressure doesn't come from the engineering department. It comes from above. Volkswagen was pursuing a clear goal: to become the world's #1 car manufacturer. Sales, market share, and expansion speed were top priorities. Delaying the product was not an option. Admitting that clean diesel wasn't ready was also not an option. At that point, Volkswagen had invested billions of dollars in its clean diesel strategy. Advertising campaigns had been launched. Commitments to shareholders had been made. Expansion plans in the US had been drawn up. Turning back would mean admitting failure. And that's when the real question arose within the company: how to pass the test without changing the car. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was the result of accumulated pressure as ambition outpaced engineering capabilities. Volkswagen didn't lack talented engineers. They lacked time, and they lacked a perfect solution. In that context, a solution began to take shape, not to make the car cleaner, but to make the test results look cleaner. And from that moment, Dieselgate was no longer a threat. It became an option. The solution Volkswagen chose wasn't in the metal, not in the engine, but in the source code. Instead of making the car actually cleaner, they made the car appear different during the test. Volkswagen installed special software in its diesel models. This software didn't operate randomly. It was designed to accurately recognize when the car was undergoing an emissions test. When the car was in the lab, the wheels rotated on a fixed axis. The steering wheel didn't move, and the speed increased and decreased in a predictable pattern. The software recognizes those signals, and at that moment, the car switches to a completely different mode. The engine reduces power. The exhaust gas treatment system is activated to its maximum. Emissions drop low enough to pass the test. On paper, the car fully complies with environmental regulations. But when it leaves the lab, when the steering wheel begins to turn, when the car rolls on real roads, that mode is immediately deactivated. The engine returns to normal, performance is restored, and emissions skyrocket. According to the US Environmental Protection Agency, actual emissions for some car models are 10 to 40 times higher than the permitted limit. The important thing is, this is not an unintentional error. This software couldn't have appeared by mistake. It was designed, programmed, tested, and approved for mass production. This was a deliberate decision. For years, the system worked perfectly. The cars passed every test. The clean diesel commercials continued to air. Sales grew. Confidence was strengthened. No one questioned it. And Volkswagen had no reason to stop until an element beyond their control emerged. Not a competitor, not a journalist, but real-world measurements. And those very numbers would bring the entire system to light. The truth wasn't revealed by a secret investigation, nor did it begin with a competitor. It started with a very simple question: why are laboratory measurements so different from those taken when a car is driven on the road? In 2014, an independent research team at West Virginia University was given a seemingly harmless task. They wanted to measure the actual emissions of diesel cars on American roads. not aimed at Volkswagen, not intended to create a scandal, just a scientific study. The results baffled them. Volkswagen's diesel vehicles, which passed laboratory tests, emitted unusually high NOx emissions in real-world conditions. Not just slightly higher, but many times higher. The research team submitted their report to the US Environmental Protection Agency and the California Emissions Regulatory Authority. Initially, there was no strong reaction. Such discrepancies had occurred before and were usually explained away as being due to different test conditions. Volkswagen offered the familiar explanations: technical errors, insignificant software issues. A small update would solve everything, but the numbers didn't change. Month after month, the regulators put more pressure on them, demanding more detailed explanations, demanding a re-examination, demanding transparency, and then at a certain point, no explanation seemed to fit anymore. In September 2015, after more than a year of investigation, Volkswagen was forced to admit what they had been trying to avoid. Their diesel cars were equipped with software designed to cheat emissions tests, not a defect, not a malfunction, but a system built intentionally. This information immediately spread globally. In just a few days, Volkswagen's stock lost more than 30% of its value. CEO Martin Winterkorn announced his resignation, and the name Dieselgate became a symbol of one of the biggest scandals in automotive history. But this was only the beginning. Once Volkswagen admitted to cheating, things happened very quickly. There was no room for explanation. There was no room for delay. Within weeks, regulatory agencies in the US and Europe were simultaneously involved. Millions of vehicles were recalled. Civil and criminal lawsuits began emerging from multiple countries at the same time. In the US, Volkswagen accepted a historic settlement. They agreed to buy back or repair vehicles for customers, compensate consumers, and pay unprecedented environmental fines. The total cost, according to financial reports and court records, exceeded $30 billion. But money wasn't the only loss. Internally, a number of senior executives were investigated. Several engineers and managers were criminally prosecuted. The culture of silence, which had helped the fraud persist, now became the focus of criticism. Beyond the boardroom and courts, the damage spilled over elsewhere. Customer trust. Volkswagen used to associate its brand with the image of clean cars. But after Dieselgate, that phrase disappeared from all campaigns. Not because the strategy changed, but because it was no longer credible. The impact didn't stop at Volkswagen. The entire diesel industry was put under scrutiny. Testing standards were tightened. Consumers began to doubt what advertising said. Dieselgate changed the way the world viewed the promises of car manufacturers. For Volkswagen, the consequences were more long-term. They were forced to restructure, change leadership, and most importantly, find a new path for the future. Not because diesel had lost its place, but because trust in diesel had been deeply damaged. And in that context, Volkswagen made a crucial decision to abandon its old image and bet its future on something else. Electricity. After Dieselgate, Volkswagen didn't disappear. They still had the scale, they still had the money, and they still had time. But they lost the most important thing that had once made them successful: the unconditional trust of the public. In the years following the scandal, Volkswagen began a far-reaching restructuring process. Senior leadership was replaced, the internal culture was scrutinized, and the entire future strategy was rewritten from scratch. This time, there was no more clean diesel, no more vague promises. Volkswagen openly bet on electric vehicles. They announced plans to invest tens of billions of dollars in electrification, to build their own electric vehicle platform, and launched a new product line bearing the ID designation. The new message was clearer, less emotional, and far more cautious. No more grandiose moral pronouncements. No more slogans promising to save the environment. There's only one quiet effort left to prove that. Volkswagen can start over, and this time, without needing to say too much. But Dieselgate leaves a lasting scar. Every new campaign is scrutinized in the light of the past. Every advertisement is questioned. Should we believe it? Volkswagen can recover financially. They can sell electric cars. They can even lead in some markets. But trust is different. Trust doesn't return just because of a new product. It takes time, and it requires consistency in every small action. The big question now is no longer, will Volkswagen survive Dieselgate? But can they rebuild trust without repeating the old mistakes? Dieselgate didn't end with a verdict. It didn't end when Volkswagen paid the fine or launched new electric models. It ended somewhere else. In the way, consumers look at a brand's promise. For decades, Volkswagen represented German engineering. Precise, disciplined, reliable. Just one wrong decision was enough to shatter that image. Not because they advertised too much, but because the advertising preceded reality. Dieselgate became a chilling reminder that, in the modern world, advertising can create trust, but it cannot sustain trust in place of actual behavior. You can write the most beautiful messages. You can invest billions of dollars in a green image. But in just one moment, when the truth contradicts the words, it all crumbles. Volkswagen still exists. They still sell cars. They still transition to an electrified future. But Dieselgate didn't disappear. It became part of the brand's history, a scar that no marketing campaign can ever completely erase. This story isn't just about Volkswagen. It's for every brand that has ever believed that images can replace the truth. Because in advertising, mistakes can cost you money. But when trust crumbles, the price to pay is always far greater.